A story is told in Luo Nyanza about a man who was very mysterious. Those who hail from his area say that you would pay him a visit with bad intentions, and he would either change into a housefly, a very old man, or just something weird, just to ensure you did not get to recognize him. In 1911, in the village of Nyamira, Kanu in Bondo, a baby boy was born to Mama Opondo Nyamagolo and Odinga Raila. He was baptized Obadia Adonija. When growing up, he schooled at Maseno and Alliance. He then joined Makerere University in Uganda for a course in education. Later, he returned to Maseno High School as a teacher. And when he was teaching at Maseno School, he developed issues with the use of Christian names, and as a result, dropped his Adonija in favor of Ajuma. We are talking about the man Oginga Odinga, the father to Raila Odinga, the current opposition chief in Kenyan politics.
Wimbo ninaimba sio wimbo ni maombi, nikiomba Mwenyezi Mungu aibariki Kenya yangu, kwa jina la Baba na la Mwana Roho Mtakatifu, amina. Kwa jina la Baba na la Mwana Roho Mtakatifu, amina. Ewe Kenya nchi yangu, ewe Kenya baba yangu, ewe Kenya mama yangu, sitakuacha milele.
He insisted on being referred to as Oginga, son of Odinga. In his autobiography, Not Yet Uhuru, Odinga wrote, "I loved teaching mathematics, and the students knew that I placed no limit on the time I would spend helping them to solve problems. I became known as the master of mathematics. Even my sermons were said to be arithmetical, and I told the students, the word of God is like an arithmetical problem. The important thing is to find a solution." So he taught at Maseno School for 3 years, and then later moved to veterinary school, where he served as principal. He later quit this job and started the Luo Thrift and Trading Corporation, following his interest to empower his Kenyan Luo ethnic group. And with time, Odinga and his group undertook to strengthen the union between the Luo people in the whole of East Africa. And his efforts earned him admiration and recognition among the Luo people, who revered him as Kir, a title previously held by the fabled classical Luo king by the name Jaramogi Ajwang. He reigned 400 years before Oginga Odinga. So vowing to uphold the ideals of Jaramogi Ajwang, Odinga became known as Jaramogi, simply man of the people of Ramogi. Hence the name Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Oginga and his colleagues also started the Luo Union movement to unite their community through East Africa. Oginga Odinga led and championed for a lot of development within the Luo region. Actually, when you visit the Luo nation, it is said that it is through Oginga Odinga's developmental capabilities and interest that RIAT, which serves as a college in Kisumu, and the molasses that was then built to serve the Luo community, came to be. And according to the Luo tradition, a Kir cannot be a politician. That stands to date. So Oginga Odinga had to relinquish his position as Kir in 1957, and then he became the political spokesperson of the Luo. That same year, he was elected member of the Legislative Council, that is Legico, representing the Central Nyanza constituency. And in 1958, he joined the Kenya African Union, that is KAU. So how did Odinga actually meet Jomo Kenyatta, and how did he gain interest into politics. Now that he was first of all a teacher, after training as a teacher, he gains interest in helping the Luo community unite, and then so he quits his job and comes back to the community, is elected as Ker, and then now with time, so we have Legico, which was dominated by the white settler politics. They have now decided that they are going to also introduce now a few African members, that is 8, representing all the 8 regions. Then they were known as provinces. And so Oginga Odinga, now that the community sees him as somebody who is better placed to lead them politically, they then allow him to quit as Ker and then now join politics, and they elect him to represent them as the MP for the whole Nyanza region. And then Odinga, in 1948, he comes to meet Jomo Kenyatta. Jomo Kenyatta was introduced to him by Achieng' Oneko. So he met Kenyatta again in June 1952 as he was planning to address a Kenya African Union, that is KAU's public rally. And in October 20th, 1952, just 3 months after the rally, a state of emergency was declared, and 183 KAU leaders were arrested and detained. During the emergency, security officers picked Oginga Odinga up one night from his Kisumu home and drove him to the bush, where they questioned him. He had just returned from an official trip to India, where he had been hosted by the then Indian Prime Minister by the name Jawaharlal Nehru. I want you to understand that the reason as to why Oginga Odinga was being arrested, he was not a leader in the KAU then. He only addressed the rally as one of the leaders, elected leaders across the country. But he was not a leader of that specific political party known as KAU. But the reasons why Oginga Odinga was being arrested is that there were claims that during the trip he had acquired arms to support in the fight against the colonial government. Remember, this is the period when Mau Mau and other communities had joined hands, being led by the leaders, including Oginga Odinga, Jomo Kenyatta, among others, to fight against the colonial rule.
I think it's also suggested, reported, that you have a private army and that you've been importing arms for this army. What's your comment on that?
Well, I wish I had it, but at the present moment I'm very sorry that I haven't got it.
Is it true that you have been sending your supporters for guerrilla training in Bulgaria and other communist countries?
Well, not my supporters. We have been sending the people who are thirsty for education from this country to go to all this country to search for education in any field, not one particular field.
So Oginga Odinga was among the leaders who called for the release of the jailed Kapenguria 6 freedom fighters, including Kenyatta, if you can remember the Kapenguria 6. So in 1957, Oginga was among the 8 Africans elected to the Legislative Council, that is Legico, which had previously been dominated by the white settler politics, just as I had said before. They later formed the African Elected Members Organization, with Odinga as chairman and Tom Mboya as the secretary. The others were Daniel Arap Moi, the former president, Bernard Mate, we had Muliro, Ngala, Lawrence Oguda, and Joseph Muimi. So come 1960, Kenya African National Union, that is Kanu, was formed, and Oginga Odinga was elected its vice president, and Gishuru was its president, while Mboya was the secretary general. So it is reported that during this time, the colonial government wanted to hand over power to Oginga Odinga so that he could form the government. But he refused, insisting that Jomo Kenyatta and all those who were detained by the colonial government had to be released first. Hence the famous phrase, Uhuru na Kenyatta. He argued that useful independence would only be achieved if Kenyans and the leaders united under one leader. So this is a point now. Jomo Kenyatta, Bildad Kagia, Kungu Karumba, among other, the Kapenguria 6 are detained in Kapenguria. Then we also have other leaders also detained wherever they are. But we have Mau Mau among other groups pushing hard for the colonial government to set Kenya free so that Kenya could have its own rule. At this point, Oginga Odinga is out. He is not detained. He is being supported by other leaders, among them Tom Mboya and other Kenyan heroes. So through this, the colonial government feels it's now a time we need to hand over power to Kenya. And so they want to hand over power to Oginga Odinga. Actually, there's even a point when a journalist was asking Oginga Odinga, referring to him as somebody who was well-versed and knew much more in politics, more than Jomo Kenyatta. But Oginga Odinga refused, saying that Jomo Kenyatta was mature. And actually, they were still learning from him. So he said he could not form government until Jomo Kenyatta was released.
Jomo Kenyatta is the father of the African nationalism and the African national movement in this country.
But surely you're all rather more advanced than he is in your thinking about politics. Wouldn't he embarrass you if he was really let go now?
We cannot in any sense be more advanced than our teacher and master, whom I think is much more advanced in political outlook in this country than we are. We are still just in the stages of learning politics from him.
At times you could ask yourself, what if he took over power and then as president, he ensured those who were detained were released? Or this approach he gave, or the approach he gave it was the best? That is food for thought. Every person have their own opinion. So when Kenya became a republic in 1964 and Kanu formed the government, Oginga was its first vice president. And as vice president, he did not agree with Jomo Kenyatta's ways of governance and ideologies. So while Odinga had called for closer ties with the People's Republic of China, the Soviet Union and other countries of the Warsaw Pact, Jomo Kenyatta was in favor of approaching the United States and the Western Bloc. So sharp differences emerged between Jomo Kenyatta and Oginga Odinga, based on their ideological differences, that is.
Jomo Kenyatta. He's been described as anti-Western and pro-communist, and I asked him what he had to say about this.
Well, let me say that I think those who think of me like that are very wrong indeed. I only laugh at them because they are short-minded and they don't know what they're doing. Why I appear to be pro-East is because the weight has been so heavily overweighted on the western side, because Kenya has been under British and the Americans' influence here is also very strong. And in order to be neutral, I might appear as if I'm pulling the weight in order to balance it towards the east. And anybody who's seeing me just I'm pulling in order to bring the balance, they tend to think that I go east, that I am, because I must pull towards east in order to bring about the balance. And immediately the balance comes, I can only be proud to tell you that I'm an African nationalist who will always tour what I feel is right for the African people in Kenya and in Africa.
So this led to the Kanu party's constitution being changed to provide for 8 vice presidents, representing the then 8 provinces, presently regions, as opposed to having one national vice president. So here comes a point, Oginga Odinga and Jomo Kenyatta, they are now not in good terms. Just 2 years after, actually less than 2 years after independence. So Jomo Kenyatta took over as president, Oginga Odinga his vice, but then now ideological differences comes in. Another person is a capitalist, the other one is a communist. So they think differently. And then now that this person helped you come out of detention, you don't really want to fire them directly. So Jomo Kenyatta thinks and feels the best way to approach this, let me strip off this person his duties, so that he only remains with the title but no duties. So Jomo Kenyatta comes up with a solution, something he thinks as a solution, and then presents it to the party, the Kanu, and then Kanu now votes for it as part of the constitution. So a rule is changed so that every region has its own vice president. We had 8 provinces then. Today they are known as regions. So those vice presidents were Daniel Moi for Rift Valley, Gishuru Central, Kibaki Nairobi, Lawrence Sagini Nyanza, Eric Hasahala Western, Jeremiah Nyaga Eastern, and Mohamud Jubat Northeastern. So with no work left but only title. So you have the title, of course you have your office, but there's no work. Oginga Odinga decided, let me resign from this post. And then I quit Kanu. This was in 1966. And so after quitting Kanu, he formed the Kenya People's Union, that is KPU.
It is fairly clear that there is pressure and desire that I should leave the government. The authority concerned has, however, showed reluctance to say so openly to the public. If I thought that there was the slightest chance of putting things right from within the government, then this desire to remove me from office would not worry me, as indeed it has not done for the last 1 year. However, wananchi, my honest opinion is that the present government has reached a point of no return. It can only do for the people the little that the underground master allows it to do. Its guiding star has become personal gain. I therefore find it impossible to be part of it, and my decision is that from now on I should be free to join with wananchi in demanding that their voice be heard.
Among those who defected with him were Chingo Neko, who was the then Minister for Information, Broadcasting and Tourism, and a former detainee who was part of the Kapenguria 6, Bildad Kagia, who was then MP for Kandara. He was elected, Bildad Kagia was later elected the KPU Vice President. That did not solve the issues between Oginga Odinga and Jomo Kenyatta. So the friction between the two continued. And in 1969, Odinga was arrested after the two, that is Jomo Kenyatta and Oginga Odinga, verbally abused each other publicly at a chaotic function in Kisumu, where at least 11 people were killed and dozens were injured in riots. That was when Kenyatta, as the president of Kenya, was to open new Nyanza General Hospital, that is Russia Hospital, in October 1969, which was seen as Oginga's project due to his Russian connections. So Oginga Odinga, I told you he was actually leaning on the side of China, Russia, the Warsaw Pact. And so through these links, Russia Hospital is built in Kisumu. But he cannot launch it because he is not the president. So as the law of the land stands, Jomo Kenyatta had to come in as the president to launch this hospital. So Jomo Kenyatta comes to launch this hospital. It is still very fresh in the Luo people minds. Now that it was just a few years after the death of Tom Mboya, just a few months, and the Luos were feeling that the government had a hand on the death of Tom Mboya. And then Oginga Odinga, who was now as their kingpin, comes in, and then they have verbal. It's like Oginga Odinga is saying this, Jomo Kenyatta is saying this. So through that, actually, those who were there then recount this incident as when it was being planned that Jomo Kenyatta was to visit the area. There are some people who even took eggs, chicken eggs, and had them put very well under manure, that is compost heap. It actually got rotten so much, such that when it hit something, it could give a sound, a loud bang, that is. So when Jomo Kenyatta started giving the verbal exchange with Oginga Odinga, somebody just threw the eggs, and from there stones and shoes and everything. And so the presidential escort and security team had to also come in. And so people were shot, 11 people died, and so many people were injured.
Kwa hivyo mimi nikiwa kiongozi wa serikali hii ya Kenya, mimi nasema siwezi kukubali mtu au vikundi vya watu kuchezea serikali yetu katika ardhi yetu tuliyoipigania. Hapana. Na kwa hivyo baada ya kupayuka rafiki yangu, nenda fundisha watu wako kulima mashamba yao wapate faida, na wako tayari kama wanawafundisha baada ya kupiga kelele huko kelele kule. Kwa hivyo ndugu zanguni, sisi tunataka kuonyesha kwa vitendo. Uhuru wetu hauwezi kwa midomo mitupu. Uhuru wetu ni vitendo, kuonyesha kwa vitendo. Tunafanya hii, tunafanya ile, hiyo ndio tunataka. Lakini watu wa kupayuka sisi hatutaki hata kidogo. Tunataka hii nchi hii tulime. Mimi nilikwenda karibu na kwako wewe Bwana Odinga kule juu. Nimekwisha peleka youth kufieka mizitu huko, kufieka majani watu walime. Na nilipokwenda huko, nilipoangalia wananiambia, mzee, watu wanakwisha fieka, lete majembe ya kulima mashamba haya. Mimi nasema kwa njia mzuri, mimi nitaleta majembe. Wanageuka wananiambia, mzee, na nani atashimba hii shamba? Nikaambia, kwa mama zenu. Kama hamtumii mikono yenu kushimba, udongo wenu mtoe mali, basi shauri yenu mzililie serikali. Kwa hivyo rafiki yangu, wafundishe hawa watu wetu, sababu wana akili, wana nguvu ya kushimba mashamba yao, walime mashamba yao, watoe mali, kuliko kupayuka hovyo. Na wewe uwasaidishe. Nimefanya na wewe bwana, na hakuna rafiki kuliko wewe. Kama ungekuwa wewe ni mtu wa kweli Odinga, ungesimama na kusema hiyo mimi nasema ni kweli. Sababu hata ndugu yangu mwenyewe, kile nilikupenda wewe, sikumpenda ndugu yangu kama wewe.
Lakini mimi niko na chakula cha kutosha.
Haya, mzuri. Kama iko na chakula ya kutosha vizuri. Haya. Sasa wanakwambia wao wako sawa. Sasa mimi nasema, sababu sikuja hapa tujibiane hivi, umekubali kama hiyo ni kweli, na kama ni kweli, tufanyie wananchi wetu kazi. Baada ya ugomvi wa bure, baada ya watu yako kutia tuba maneno pale, wamepata faida gani? Wengi watalala ndani ya jela, wengi wamekusha pigwa na askari, walipata faida gani? Unafikiri mimi naweza kupenda mambo kama hayo?
Wako na njaa.
Kwa nini wewe hapana mpewe chakula? Unashibisha tumbo yako, na wao na wacha na njaa, unaambia kwenda sana. Kwa nini wewe hapana wapa chakula kama wako na njaa, baada ya kuja kutupa mali? Sasa ndugu zanguni, mimi nasema kwamba ni lazima hii nchi yetu ni nchi yetu. Na mimi nasema tena kwamba hatuwezi kutaka mtu au watu kuharibu nchi yetu. Hatuwezi kutaka mtu au watu kuharibu uhuru wetu. huyu ni Mjaluo, huyu ni Mkikuyu, huyu ni Muluhya, huyu ni Mmasai, huyu ni Mkamba, huyu ni Mzwai. Ndio ngane ayafurahi, sababu katika doctrine yake, katika mipango ya beberu ni divide and rule, gawanya ndio uweze kutawala. Labda walikugawia hiyo kitu baba, na wewe unataka kutugawanya ndio tutawale. Tutakubali hiyo, tunakataa. Wewe ndio uko na uwezo. Haya, mimi niko na uwezo, na mimi kama unajua rafiki yangu, mimi niko na uwezo. Ndio, mimi niko na uwezo, na mimi tatumia uwezo wangu kwa njia nzuri, hapana kwa njia ya kutupa mawe pale njiani. Njia nzuri, tutafute chakula ya wananchi, tutafute dawa nzuri ya kuwapa watu wetu, kama hospitali hii ambao wanataka kuiharibu. Tutafute dawa nzuri ya kuwatibu, tutafute mashule mazuri, watu wetu wende wakasome, tufanye mabarabara mazuri, watu wetu wapate kwenda katika njia nzuri na mambo kadhalika. Tutafute kulima kuzuri, ndio wananchi wetu wapate mali kutoka katika udongo wao. Hiyo ndiyo kazi yetu tukiwa Kanu, hiyo ndiyo kazi yetu, na tunawasaidisha wananchi wetu, na ni lazima tutazidi kuwasaidisha. Nitaendelea na kukwambia.
So due to this incident, KPU was banned, making Kenya a de facto party state under Kanu. So Oginga Odinga was detained along with other KPU members for 18 months until the then government made a decision to free him on 27th March 1971. He consigned to political limbo until after Kenyatta's death in August 1978. Oginga Odinga, the man, again comes out now that he has been out of the public limelight. Jomo Kenyatta has died, and so his body is lying in parliament. Oginga Odinga travels all the way from Bondo to Nairobi to come bid farewell to his friend turned foe, Jomo Kenyatta. When interviewed and asked why, he said he was not an enemy. They only had ideological differences.
Are all your differences now forgotten in his death?
Oh, no, but we have not had very much difference. It's only the way of doing them, but the goal was very much the same.
So Kenya had its elections and Daniel Moi won, and so he took over power after Kenyatta's death. He appointed Oginga the chairman of the Cotton, Lint and Seed Marketing Board. He did not last long in this position though. Presumably due to the past grudges, he was still outspoken against Kenyatta's policies. And one day in a public rally actually in Mombasa, Oginga Odinga accused Kenyatta as a land grabber, and he cited that as the reason behind their differences. So in as much as the media and so many people reported their differences, actually the reason behind them being turned foes as being just ideological differences, Oginga Odinga now comes out after the death of Kenyatta and tells the public that the reason behind our differences is not ideological, but it is because this person is a land or was a land grabber.
The press must be a champion of the social political, and economic development of the people. It must thus seek to report on the efforts of the people to bring about these developments. The press must indeed go further than this and champion those social, political, and economic systems best suited for the development of Africa. In a nutshell, the press must be involved in championing the correct direction of development in Africa and culture on which African socialism as our ideal without the consent of the total. Back into some papers which, when there is anything good about me or good about somebody whom they have selected not to publicize, then that one they will play down and even put it in a hidden corner somewhere. But when something comes bad about Odinga, they will make the headline.
So in 1982, there comes a coup. Actually, it failed, but this coup was against Moi's government. Oginga Odinga was one of the suspects, and so he was placed again under house arrest in Kisumu. Actually, if you want to understand more of what transpired before, during, and after the 1982 coup, you can visit our history segment. We told the story about Ochuka, the man who was behind the 1982 coup. Just check on it, have a look, watch the whole of it, and you'll understand everything that happened. So in 1990, Oginga Odinga tried in vain with others to register an opposition party, that is the National Democratic Party. In 1991, he co-founded and became the interim chairman of Forum for Restoration of Democracy, that is Ford Party. However, Ford split before the 1992 general elections, making up two factions. Ford Kenya, which was led by Oginga Odinga, and Ford Asili, which was led by the then Kiharu MP, Kenyatta Matiba. And in that year's general election, that is 1992, the opposition parties, including Mwai Kibaki's Democratic Party, lost to Moi's Kanu. So Matiba came second, Kibaki third, and Oginga fourth. However, Oginga Odinga regained the Bondo constituency seat. This was after being forced out of parliamentary politics for over 2 decades. So after winning, he was actually, he became the official opposition leader in parliament. So in a farewell address to parliament on December 9th, 1993, before MPs broke for the Christmas holiday, Oginga, who was the then leader of the opposition in parliament, spoke as if he knew that his time had come. And he said, let me quote, "I want to leave you, MPs, with one thing. Please make this house responsible. I want our people on the other side, Kanu, to also make this house responsible. We all belong to Kenya, and we should not abuse this country." Oginga Odinga died in 1994 at Aga Khan Hospital in Kisumu. He is buried at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Mausoleum in his Bondo home. It's good that we understand that Oginga Odinga was a fearless leader. And like many politicians, Oginga Odinga would not compromise his ideals, irrespective of the consequences that would follow. He was in the first cabinet at independence in 1963 as Minister for Home Affairs. In 1964, when Kenya became a republic and Kenyatta the President, he was appointed Vice President and Minister for Home Affairs. Oginga Odinga believed that socialism was the best way to serve the poor, and as a result, he described it as equalization of opportunities and called on the rich to extend a hand of generosity to the poor. Globally, in the global politics now, Oginga Odinga was one of the signatories of the agreement to convene a convention for drafting a world constitution. As a result, for the first time in human history, a World Constituent Assembly convened to draft and adopt the constitution for the Federation of Earth. And in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, May 21st in 1963, during the very first meeting of the African heads of states, and governments at the inception of the Organization of African Unity, OAU, Oginga was sent to represent the African national liberation movements in non-independent territories. He actually gave a speech on behalf of all the countries that had not gained independence yet. Like just a few, about 30, 33, 34 countries had gained independence in Africa. And so there were still quite a good number of countries that were still fighting for independence. So OAU is formed basically to help other countries fight for independence and to help the whole of Africa get or gain independent rule. So Oginga Odinga from Kenya, now that Kenya was also one of the countries that had not yet gained independence at the time when this meeting was being convened by Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. Oginga Odinga is then selected by other countries that had not yet gained independence to go represent them in this meeting. And so he gives a speech on behalf of all of them. Actually, we will give you the speeches of all those who were in attendance of the then 1963 OAU first meeting.
The status of Africa. Well, Africa will tour its own line. And it is not for him to know his status in life. He will just play its own part in its own country.
Oginga Odinga had 4 wives: Mary Juma, Gaudensia Dea, Susan Agik, and Betty Adongo. With these wives, he had 17 children. That is the story of Oginga Odinga. My name is Kwach, and this is the Satmamba Productions.
Is it your ambition to become president of Kenya?
But that is not for me to judge. Let it be that is it the wish of the people. If it is the wish of the people that I should lead them in any direction, in any way, let them. It will be their own judgment and so on, and not mine.
Mr. Odinga, there's been a lot of feeling in Britain about the deportation of Mr. Beeston of the Daily Telegraph. Can you tell us the reasons for his deportation?
But that is known, and I needn't actually elaborate on it.
Hii ni serikali yenu, na tunataka nyinyi kuangalia hii serikali. Tena kuwa na roho ya kuangalia serikali hii, watu wapana chafua pande huu. Usikubali kwa watu kuchafua serikali. Na usikubali kwa serikali aende kando. Ikiwa kama unaona sisi tuko na kasoro, sema wasi. Hapana kaa kimya. Utasema tu kwa sauti ya wale watu wenu ambao iko katika parliament.